My name again is Veena Rao. I'm an IEC based out of Georgia. I am here to be able to facilitate a discussion to help us all understand how students can prepare for STEM majors. The idea of this, this panel session sort of took place when I was at a conference for SACAC. And Jared happened to be walking by, and we grabbed him to be able to get some information about how students should prepare for STEM-based majors at universities. And I thought it'd be a wonderful resource for everyone to have. And so I'm so glad that we've had Jared join us, McKayla, as well as Kenzo. So in terms of our panelists, today, we've got Jared Howard from CalTech, McKayla Bohannon from Georgia Tech, and we have Kenzo Tsuru from Georgia State University joining us. So the presentation, the way that the panel will unfold today is that what we're going to be able to do is to have a introduction from each of the admissions officers. I want to have them introduce their universities as well, talk a little bit about their programs, and then I'm gonna pose questions to them about STEM prep, and then we'll get to questions from the audience at the end. So I'd like to hand over the presentation to Kenzo first to tell us a little bit about Georgia State.
Great. Thank you so much for the introduction, and good evening, everyone. It is a pleasure to be able to speak with you. So as Ms. Veena was saying, my name is Kenzo Tsuru. I am the Assistant Director for the Welcome Center at Georgia State University. Just giving you a quick, brief rundown of Georgia State. So we are one of the largest institutions in the state of Georgia. Used to be the largest, only to be handed off the baton to our wonderful partners over at Georgia Tech. So congratulations. We have over 250 majors, minors, and dual degree programs ranging from the arts to the sciences such as biology, chemistry, computer science, physics, and even some of the health sciences such as nursing, respiratory therapy, and occupational therapy. In terms of some of our most popular majors, so I will name the top 5. That would be primarily our psychology, biology, computer science, neuroscience, and then also our nursing program. A couple of things to note with Georgia State's programs, though, is that we do have 3 different types of programs here. That's going to be our regular, flip, and gated. So there might be some majors like computer science and nursing that are going to be, or they're going to require specific grades in certain classes that you need to complete before you can continue in those majors and programs. So definitely a bunch of stuff that you need to be aware of. And of course, if you have any questions, you can feel free to let me know, and I'll be happy to direct you to the course catalog to find those requirements. But I know there's so much to say about Georgia State. I know we just don't have enough time within 5 minutes. What will I say next, I guess? Last thing is that we do have our football team, of course. They're up and coming. Again, picking on Georgia Tech a lot here because they're amazing partners, but we got our first home football game against Georgia Tech on August 31st. So fingers crossed, please be kind with us. But we'll see how it goes. If y'all want to come out, definitely encourage you to come on out. It's going to be a great time. But I will pass it back to Ms. Rao.
I'd like to now ask McKayla to present about Georgia Tech.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kenzo, for setting me up there. Yeah, so my name is McKayla Bohannon. I'm one of the admission counselors at Georgia Tech. I primarily work with first-generation students, so those of you students who are the first in your families applying to college. I work with those students, as well as I mostly do a lot of recruiting. My main territories are Fulton County and DeKalb County. So students, if you're familiar with Georgia, I'm probably going to be at one of your schools if you're in one of those counties this fall. In terms of Georgia Tech, so pretty large institution, but we're very unique in terms of majors that we offer. We only offer 39 different majors across 6 different colleges. So Georgia Tech is most well known for engineering and computer science. Those are our 2 most popular colleges. Engineering, housing 11 different majors, all ranked in the top 5 in the country. Computer science, or College of Computing, housing computer science, a very popular major for Georgia Tech as well. But we also have 4 other colleges. So our College of Design, so anything from industrial design to architecture, if you're interested in that. Our College of Business, our Scheller College of Business, houses business administration, where students can choose one of 8 different tracks. So anything from entrepreneurship to accounting to finance to marketing you choose your own track in our business school. We also have our College of Sciences, so anything from mathematics to physics, chemistry, biochemistry, majors like that. And then lastly, our Ivan Allen College of Liberal Arts, which most people wouldn't think Georgia Tech has, but we do. So anything from international affairs to public policy to modern languages, Georgia Tech definitely has a major geared towards the liberal arts. So that is a little bit about Georgia Tech. In terms of requirements, I won't get too much into that, but here at Georgia Tech, we utilize a holistic application review. So we don't just base admission decisions just on GPA and or test score. We take a look at a bunch of different things to make a decision. So anything from your lived experiences as students to letters of recommendation, to your activities, to your essays, to your transcript, literally anything that is put in that common application, we utilize to make an admission decision. So with that, I'll pass it to Jared.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jared Howard. I'm an Assistant Director of Undergraduate Admissions here at the California Institute of Technology, also known as CalTech. For those of you who are unfamiliar with us, we are a small research institution in Pasadena, California, which is roughly about 20 minutes outside of Los Angeles, if that gives you a little context as to where we are. Again, we're a research-based institution. We are the greatest research institution in the world. We have over 20 options for you to choose from. Options, most schools call them majors, but we call them options here for you to choose from. And we do have some non-STEM focuses as well, including English and history and political science as well. So we have a few different options for you to integrate into STEM and humanities alike. We're a very interdisciplinary education. So we want to make sure that we give students a great foundation to really go out and tackle different things out into the field of STEM. Our core belief is that we are always pushing STEM forward. So when students are coming here, we do give them the opportunity to do a lot of research, but your humanities are just as important. We're looking at the way that you write, the way that you public speak, the way that you comprehend and understand the things that have come before you so that you can figure out how to move the goalpost forward. We're also the only institute that manages a NASA facility. So for those of you interested in working for NASA, we are a great choice for you to consider, as they are just down the street. And a lot of our students are doing work there during the school year and during the summer, of course. There are some questions we're going to answer later. So without diving too deep into those before we get there, that is the gist of who we are at CalTech.
Now, before we proceed on to the prep component, are there specific majors that students need to apply to at your specific institutions at the outset? Meaning that they have to apply to them as freshmen, or else they may not be able to transfer into those majors as they move forward at the institutions. Kenzo, you want to start?
So I'll say I can maybe kick us off. So this is a great question because those programs, the way that we call them at Georgia State, is that those are the gated programs. So they do require a separate application, although I will say in terms of the STEM fields, we don't have any particular program that requires students to declare and apply into it during their first year at Georgia State. But there are some that students are encouraged to apply into them at the end of their sophomore year, or leading into their sophomore year. And then some of them will extend an invitation out to students just depending on the academic performance. So for example, our nursing major, if a student is just nailing those classes, really, they love chemistry, they're getting those A's and those hundreds, they may get an invitation from the nursing program to just go ahead and apply and get that offer of admissions. However, that is very case by case. For the most part, students will be applying into their programs at the end of their sophomore year or in the spring semester of their sophomore year.
Yeah, I'll speak for Georgia Tech. So in terms of applying directly to a major, that is true for our computer science major. It's brand new. It's becoming very popular and very overcrowded. And so there's been stipulations on that. So if you are interested in computer science, you have to apply as computer science. And then you're in the major, you can no longer apply as a different major, change once you're admitted. That is no longer an option to students. So you have to apply with that same major on your Common App and be admitted. Same thing for our music technology major as well. You have to apply, be admitted to our music technology within College of Design, and then around year two or three, you have to then do like another interview round process with the music technology program. So for Georgia Tech, those are the two.
So we're a little different. You don't have to apply to a specific program, but you cannot declare your option specifically until your third quarter here at CalTech. So we're on the quarter system. Every 10 weeks, you do get a new set of classes, but as a first year, you are not into your specific option until your third quarter. However, when you do apply, we do ask you what your intended option is because that helps us review your application as its entirety. So if you're saying you want to go into chemistry, we want to be able to read your application and say, this is a student who is serious about chemistry and we can help them reach their next level, as opposed to you coming in thinking you're doing chemistry and then you get sidetracked. That's why we give you the opportunity to understand college before you officially declare what that option will be. But we want to make sure before you get here that your intentions are actually true.
One of the first questions, obviously, I'm going to go to is, do you expect students, for instance, who are applying to engineering to have taken specific levels of math and physics? We can start in reverse order. Jared, you want to jump in?
Yeah, for sure. So it's not necessarily that we're looking for you to take specific courses to go into specific options. We're making sure that you take specific courses because we offer something called a core curriculum. And with that core curriculum, every single student goes through that no matter what their option is. So when you are coming to CalTech, we expect you to have a specific foundation of education so that when you're going through these courses, you're not fumbling or you're confused or you don't really know what's going on in comparison to your peers. So we do require you to take at least the very general level of calculus, chemistry, and physics. All three of those are required, and we do know that there are some schools who don't offer them. So we've figured out alternative pathways to make sure that students are able to prove their proficiency so that they don't feel as if they can't apply to CalTech. But at the minimum, you need the general level of calculus, chemistry, and physics to be successful in any realm here at CalTech.
Yeah, for Georgia Tech, so since we utilize a holistic process, we sort of meet you students as where you are. And so we really try to look at what is your high school offer to you, and are you challenging yourself to take those most rigorous courses available to you? So if the highest level of math is calculus or is AP, or BC, what have you, we're looking to see the students are challenging themselves to take the highest level of math offered to them. We know every school is not the same, and so we can't penalize students if they don't have access to take a certain course. But if if your school offers those higher level science and calculus or math courses, we do expect students to be taking those higher level courses because Georgia Tech is a very rigorous institution. So you're only going to be challenged once you get to Georgia Tech. So we like to see students reaching that highest level of rigor that they can at their high school.
So for Georgia State University, we're not necessarily going to be looking at the highest level of math that you've completed during the application process. However, typically what we will recommend is for students to be mindful of the starting level math that they will begin with for their specific majors. So to kind of give you an example, if you're doing nursing or computer science, those students start off with college algebra. However, if you're looking at, let's say, physics, those students are starting off with pre-calculus or even calculus 1, calculus 2. Here it's calc 1 of life variables or calc 2 of life variables, so on and so forth. So it is important to note, really specifically, depending on the program that you want to pursue, what that level is or what math level you're going to be starting off at here at Georgia State. Just because we do require all STEM students to do a math placement exam unless they have those AP credits and they can kind of opt out and exempt out of it. But the main thing here is that we want to make sure you start off with a solid foundation. So if that means starting off, let's say, with quantitative reasoning and analysis and then going into college algebra, that may be your pathway. But it is important to know that sometimes, if you start off a little lower than where you're supposed to begin, that may mean an extra class that you have to take for that program.
Now, to start with, obviously, computer science is one of those majors. McKayla has already talked about the fact that it is a gated major in a way at Georgia Tech. What are the kind of classes you're expecting CS kids to have taken if they're applying to CS at each of your institutions?
I guess I'll start. I'll also start with the question that was just asked in the chat. in terms of calculus for CalTech. Which specific level are you looking at? We are looking at the minimum general calculus. So pre-calculus does not count to us as full calculus. You will need at minimum general calculus. Now, we're similar to Georgia Tech in the sense of we do look at the level of rigor that your school does offer. So if your school does offer AP Calculus BC, we expect to see that you took that. A lot of students do not realize that their counselors have to submit a school report code. So we absolutely do know what classes are offered at your school, even though you think we may not know. We know every single class and which years they were offered. So we do require at minimum general calculus. But if there are more challenging, whether it's multivariables, whether it's diffie-Qs, whether it's AB, BC, if you're taking IBs, we require HL. So we want to make sure that regardless of focus, calculus, chemistry, physics, that you are taking the most advanced courses possible. Only offer AP pre-calculus at the most important rate. So that's why we do offer those alternative pathways. So you can submit an AP exam, you can have a schoolhouse certification, you can, there's an IB exam that you can take. So even though your school may not offer a specific course, if you feel like you have the knowledge for that course to be considered mastered, you can take those, submit them to us, and we'll count it just the same. But as far as getting into specific programs, again, we don't admit into specific programs. That's why with our core curriculum, we expect you to have the basics of calculus, chemistry, and physics because of the type of education that we offer is pretty different for most institutions. So that's why we do encourage you to take the most rigorous available to you so that when you get here, you're not in computer science classes and feeling like you're inadequate or you're not up to par because everyone has had to take the same exact type of classes to get into CalTech regardless of what their option is.
Yeah, for Georgia Tech, again, going back to like our holistic review process, it just depends. If your school offers those calculus-based classes, we expect students to be taking those. And if you have the option, we not only is it in coursework, we also sort of look for in your activity section, do you have some evidence that you have done some computer science activity throughout your high school journey? Because Georgia Tech computer science is very competitive, probably one of our most competitive majors. And so we like to see students, if they have the option to taking those courses at the high school level, and also if they have the option to outside of coursework, doing those activities around computer science as well. So yeah, that's sort of what we look for.
So, and for Georgia State specifically, in terms of our admissions process, I'll be honest and transparent, it is primarily going to be looking at those GPAs and test scores if you're required to submit them. The big thing here is that, especially for computer science at Georgia State, or even let's say nursing or any of those STEM related programs, you don't necessarily have to have, for example, principles of computer science completed in your high school curriculum by the time you come to Georgia State. We have those classes built in directly into the curriculum from the get-go. The big focus with Georgia State University is making sure that all students have access to those entry-level courses, even after they complete high school. Just because I'll give you my example, when I was in Roswell High School, they didn't really have those computer science courses available to us at that time, right? But I think now almost every single high school is either going to have computer science principles or some form or manner. It is encouraged for students to have that under the belt, just so that way you familiarize yourself with the concepts, and when you enter the classroom setting, it's really more of a refresher rather than learning from entirely from scratch. But if you don't have that option available to you at your high school, or you didn't have the opportunity to take that course, that is not an issue with us. You can just take that class when you enroll here at Georgia State.
I think the next question goes to the idea of whether the student is applying to STEM specifically or to the university as a whole. Do you expect students to have taken all three sciences? Because I think when we were younger, it was you had to take bio, like chem and physics. But the question is now, are you still expecting students to have taken all three sciences?
So I guess I can start us off with this one, if that's okay. Or Jared, if you want to go ahead, you can.
No, for sure. Go for it.
No worries. So with Georgia State, no, we won't necessarily be looking for you to complete biochemistry and physics. The big thing that we're going to be looking at in terms of your curriculum requirements, especially in sciences, is if you did 4 years of science, 1 in life, 1 in physical science, and 2 of higher level. So that could be environmental sciences, that can be human anatomy and physiology. It could be physical science if that's something you want to do. We won't necessarily be requiring you to complete those, but just depending on the program that you're interested in, it may be beneficial to do those AP courses for those levels. Just because, for example, biology, they do Principles of Bio 1 and 2, Principles of Chemistry 1 and 2, and if you're planning to go in medical, Principles of Physics 1 and 2. So it can just kind of give you that little bit of a head start if you have those AP credits completed by the time you enroll.
I would say generally the same for Georgia Tech. So since we're both within the university system of Georgia, the university system does require those four sort of sciences that Kenzo sort of laid out there. We don't look at specifics, but we do just, when it comes to enrollment and looking at those final graduation, high school graduation requirements, we just look for those four sciences. In terms of specific programs, it just depends on what your school offers to you. But we do like to see students challenging themselves to reach those highest level sciences for sure.
Again, we primarily require calculus, chemistry, and physics. We don't require biology, but we do recommend it. So if you do have that option, please absolutely take it. But again, when we're looking at your overall profile, we are looking to see what are you doing specifically toward your specific goals. So if you're saying, I want to research biology, when I get to CalTech, of course, we expect you to have taken a number of biology courses to ensure when you are crafting that application to say, this is a student who's serious about biology, but we do require you to take physics and chemistry for sure.
I think the next question goes to something that I had to deal with when my own daughter was like, trying to pick her senior year courses, which was she'd finished like trig and algebra 2. She didn't want to take calc, so she chose AP stats. So what are your thoughts on AP stats? Is it like, if calculus is on offer, does it matter if the applicant is going into STEM that they like choose that, or what are your thoughts on that? And we can start in reverse. So Jared, why don't you go ahead?
So stats is a little fun. We don't require statistics, but we also know. So I read the state of Georgia and I read the Bay Area. So I'm fully aware. My high school diploma is also from the state of Georgia. So fully aware of how the education works there. But for us specifically, we don't require AP stats. However, we know that every school doesn't offer 3 full years of calculus. So some students will take calculus sophomore and junior year, and the only math available their senior year is AP statistics. So if that is something that you're taking because that's all that's left and available to you, that's perfectly fine. If you don't take AP stats, we're not mad about it. If anything, I would say like if you're choosing to study math, maybe that'll be a little bit more helpful, but we don't look at transcripts to specifically look for AP stats. But again, if that's your only option during your senior year, we absolutely encourage you to take it to make sure that you're still in continuation of taking 4 consistent years in math.
I would say for Georgia Tech, it same as what Jared just said. Since we are a STEM institution, and Georgia Tech's unique in that the base level of math offered at Tech is calculus. So no matter what your major is at Tech, whether it's in our business school or engineering, every student has to take Calc 1. So we like to see students who are on that Calc track. And so most students will then go from pre-calculus to those higher levels. But if you cannot go past pre-calculus in your high school, which is completely true for many schools, we like to see you still taking a math. So that AP stats is where that could come in. But just so students are aware, we do like to see that calculus, we call it calculus ready track. And so once you finish that algebra 1, geometry, algebra 2, we like to look for pre-calculus if your school offers it, but if not, that AP stats is perfectly fine. But just so students are aware, at Georgia Tech, you're gonna have to take Calc 1.
I think just echoing everything that these my great partners here were mentioning. So same with Georgia State, it's not the end of the world if you can't take AP calculus if it's not being offered at your school. Like McKayla was saying, it's just a matter of what your school has to offer. What's really going to matter here at the end of the day is whether or not you're challenging yourself for that curriculum. Because if you've got the option to do, let's say, college ready math, or what is it called, college ready math versus AP statistics, of course, we're going to want to see AP statistics over that college ready math. And the other part, and this is just more, so similarly, I was mentioning to Ms. Rao, I did mechanical engineering for my undergraduate degree at first. And I will say that statistics is slept on because you need to be able to know how to read statistics in order to understand data and to make your own conclusions and interpretations. So if that is what is available to you, go ahead and take it, it's perfectly fine. But at least in terms of our institutions, it's not necessarily going to be a make or break factor. It is entirely dependent on the context of your school. But it's always encouraged, just follow with all the schools just to be safe. You want to double check and, triple check that list and make sure you're good to go.
So to sort of follow up on one of the classes that you guys had talked about, which was physics, right? Obviously, some schools are able to offer AP Physics 1, then C and E. And so the question is, if the students are on track to be able to take those courses, should students push themselves to take those higher level courses for majors and for institutions as competitive as yours?
For us, absolutely. We're a very competitive school. That's not a secret. There's a lot of students who apply to us, 4.0s, highest test score. So when we're doing a holistic review, it's easier to get a full profile of a student who's extending themselves beyond what's just required. So for instance, the way that I'm reading a Bay Area student is not the same that I'm reading a Georgia State student, because they have two different opportunities of education. So if the Georgia student, I can see their curriculum, that they're going above and beyond what's required, and they're doing these extracurriculars and these things of that nature. It makes their overall profile look a lot better, as opposed to just they took advanced courses, because we get a lot of students who are taking advanced courses. It's about what you're doing with those courses toward your goals in STEM here at CalTech. So we absolutely do encourage you to take the most advanced courses. If physics, especially if something like physics is what you want to study, we absolutely want to see that you're taking all of those physics courses, so that when we're discussing you as a whole to decide who's coming into the university, we can say the student's serious about their education. Look at the type of courses that they're taking based on their environment. This is above and beyond for where they are. These are the type of extracurriculars that pair well with the education that they're going for. So if it's in your wheelhouse and in the realm of what you want to do moving forward with your education, absolutely. Absolutely, every time.
Agreed. Honestly, because just like CalTech, Georgia Tech, it's no secret that we're also very competitive. And so, especially being within the state of Georgia, very super competitive. But same thing, if you have the opportunity to do so, we definitely recommend challenging yourself to take those higher level courses, because when we're reviewing as in groups, we're constantly asking ourselves, when you're identifying and looking at your transcript and looking at your school's school report, we're asking ourselves, is this student ready to take classes at Georgia Tech today? Like, if we were to admit them right now, can we put them in a classroom and they can take these rigorous courses at Georgia Tech? So that's sort of the question we're asking ourselves as we're reviewing. And so if you're going above and beyond that, that's really great for us, because that shows us that you are very prepared and can take those classes today.
So I was honestly on the complete opposite end of the spectrum here for Georgia State, since we are not as exclusive, or as competitive, better to say. We like to kind of pitch that we're an access institution, mainly meaning that if you meet those GPA requirements or those test score requirements, and you meet the high school graduation requirements, as well as our curriculum requirements, you're good to go. So I won't say, like you have to go up to Physics C, you have to go up to Physics B. But what I will say is that if you are interested in the Honors College or merit-based scholarships from the Office of Undergraduate Admissions, or even, for example, if you're in-state or out-of-state, that'd be Stamp Scholars or Presidential Scholarship that offer full rides, then yes, we're going to want to see that you're applying yourself, right? Because sometimes those GPAs, I kind of give you an idea. The GPA for a recipient of the Stamp Scholars program this past year was around a 4.3. So it is a very competitive review process. So that's what I would definitely say. If you're looking at honors college, those scholarships, all those opportunities that will really make college, a debt-free process, that you will have all the funds and resources you need, then definitely apply yourself, because that is something that we do take into consideration when considering students into the honors college and for scholarships. Is, if your high school goes all the way up to Physics C, up until where did you go, right? If you stopped at on-level physics, and then the rest of your classes were filled with band, orchestra, PE, underwater basket weaving, then that won't necessarily be the most competitive applicant compared to a student that does 20 APs and 15 honors courses. Now, again, it's in the context of your school. So if your school does AP underwater basket weaving and that's the only class, then of course we're going to use that for your benefit when we review your application.
So one of the questions that just sort of came into the chat was, if the high school offers AP Physics C, but the student prefers to take AP Physics 2 instead, will that suffice instead if the overall schedule is rigorous?
For us, yes. Again, as long as you have the general physics that meets the requirement of what you need at CalTech, what you do post that general physics or that 1 year of physics is completely up to you. So if you choose to take 2 over C, that's perfectly fine. Again, you have a lot of room in your application to explain any of these things. So whether it's through personal statements, whether it's through talk about a time where STEM really impacted your education, like you have a lot of room to talk about why you made certain choices. And us, again, having that holistic approach, this gives us opportunity to understand why you chose path A versus path B. So ultimately, that's up to you at CalTech. But again, as long as you have that 1 general year of physics, that's all that you need that is required to at least be competitive.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. Up to you. We still see that as a higher level college ready class. So AP is AP. So as much as you can, definitely still challenging yourself. We don't deem one course better than another. We still see it as you challenging yourself because it is a college level course.
I think just echoing everything everyone already said already, they have some great answers. I think the only thing I'll really add in here is just be very mindful of the curriculum, right? So if, for example, I'm just going to use our GSU classes. We have Introductory Physics 1 and Principles of Physics 1. One is calculus based, the other one is college algebra based, right? So just depending on what you plan to pursue, if you really go into physics and want to major in physics, you want to make sure that you're ready for that calculus level physics. But just, be mindful of that. But beyond that, I mean, we're not going to hold it against you if you go physics 2 over physics C or vice versa. The big thing here, like everyone else was saying, is that we want to see that you're applying yourself, that you're literally pursuing those higher level courses, even if it's, the only higher level course available at your school.
So I guess the next level is, what if the student has maximized whatever is offered in the school? If there's a local community college, are you aware of the fact that there might be opportunities there? And would you then expect students to have taken higher level classes in math or sciences outside of their school in the local community? And what if you're reading applications, I guess, from students from that same school who might have done that? Does that impact an applicant when you're being compared in a pool of students from the same school?
For us, yes and no. No depends on how you craft your application, because we understand that every student is different and you don't have the same home life, you don't have the same financial arrangements, you don't have the same opportunities. But again, if you're just submitting your standard application, hey, I like STEM, this is fun, I took some courses, as opposed to explaining like, there were opportunities that I wish I could have taken, and instead of being able to take those opportunities, I did these things instead because this is what I could do. But if we don't know your story, we can't form any judgment to help kind of ease our mind. So if we're seeing there are 3 kids from your school who are doing dual enrollment, and for whatever reason you're choosing not to, but you're not saying, these are the other avenues I've taken because I didn't have that opportunity, that doesn't give us anything to really go off of, other than there are other students in your school who are applying themselves a lot more. So for us, it's more so about crafting your application intentionally so that we can understand what your parameters are, what your living situation is, what your academic goals are. Some students don't have an interest in dual enrollment courses, and that's perfectly fine. Some students are more organization involved than they are academically. So they could be in the most rigorous courses in their school, but they're choosing to also be the president of the chemistry club. They're also choosing to be drum major of the marching band. They're also choosing to be a volunteer in the local community. So everyone's situation is different. So again, for us, I think just like the other two as well, it's a very holistic approach. It's not just about the courses that you take. However, because of the way your application is structured, if we don't know your story, we can't do anything except compare you to your peers.
I mean, well done, well said. Honestly, same, because we understand using holistic process, we can't penalize students if certain courses or opportunities were not afforded to them. And we understand that. And specifically for our Georgia schools, our Georgia high schools, all of our counselors reach out to high school counselors just to ask information of, hey, do your students have access to do this outside of school? What do they have access to do? If there's something missing in that school report, we'll sort of ask our Georgia high school counselors those questions. But again, going back to what Jared just said, it depends on how you craft your application as well, because there's many opportunities to sort of tell your story to us. So whether it's your essays or through your activities, or there's even an additional information section to just let us know any and everything that we might have missed otherwise. As well as letters of recommendation. So goes back to crafting your application, but we don't penalize students if you weren't afforded certain opportunities.
Again, just wonderful answers from all my colleagues here on the panel. Exactly the same thing. I mean, it's not going to be penalized against you if it's not available to you. But again, what's the big thing, as everyone else was saying, is you have to tell us that story, right? Unfortunately, we're not in the classroom there with you taking these classes. We're not going home with you to see what's happening at home. We're not there with you in your extracurricular activities. So that's where that common app essay is really important. Also, the college-specific essays are really important. What I will add, though, is that with us, in terms of the Honors College review process, once more, again, like, unless we know why you didn't take those classes, we're going to be comparing you to your peers and then asking, why didn't a student take dual enrollment at one of the local community colleges, or even at Georgia State if you're a Georgia high school resident, right? So just make sure, and I think this is maybe the best thing that I wish I had done a little more in my college application process, but don't be afraid to be vulnerable and to tell us those stories and to share what's going on in your life that may be impacting your academics.
I think the next question goes to the idea of how does a student demonstrate fit for major, even if the student is not necessarily being admitted to a specific major. If they're required to indicate an interest area or a major, how do they demonstrate fit? What kind of experiences are you looking for in the student application? Jared, do you want to jump in? Oh, sorry, let's start with McKayla this time.
Yeah, sure. So in terms of like the activities portion, we don't necessarily we don't like to always see every single activity that you list directly tied to that specific major. So our motto is progress and service at Georgia Tech. So we like to see students who are serving other people around them. So we include that to be anything from clubs to sports to a part-time job to taking care of a family member. So that activity section doesn't have to be tied to only activities directly related to your major. However, what we do look for that information that sort of fit and interest to major is sort of our supplemental essay. So we call it the Georgia Tech essay. And we ask one question, but it stumps a lot of students. It's a two-part question. We ask, why do you want to study your intended major and why at Georgia Tech? So we like to have students done some research on that specific program. So if it's mechanical engineering, what about mechanical engineering specifically at Georgia Tech interests you? Why our program and not another institution's program? So we like to see students that you've done some research. If there's certain professors you want to work with, classes you want to take, research you want to get involved in. So very specific things to Georgia Tech is what we're looking for in that essay. So that's where we sort of identify that interest to major.
So same thing with Georgia State. We're not necessarily looking at those clubs and activities, making sure that they're aligned with that interest in major. With some of our most competitive programs at state, the best way that we're going to see that fit for major is actually in those core classes you're completing in that first and second year here. We use a model called GPS advisement, which means that we keep track of all your grades, compare your grades to the last 18 million grades of the last 15 years, and then run some calculations to see what your percentage of graduating on time is. And to kind of give you an actual statistic, if you are interested in nursing and take Survey of Chemistry 1 and get a C- in that class, that student will be at a 16% chance of graduating within 4 years. So that's when we're going to reach out. We're going to make sure that you're following the program that best suits your passions and interests. And if it is your passion and interest, that we make sure you have access to the resources to be successful and get into the program. But we won't necessarily be keeping track 100% of what clubs you're doing and whether that aligns with your major. It's very similarly, I think, to what McKayla was saying. We're going to want to see the clubs that you're involved in, whether that's community service, after school, if it's an after school job and you got to take care of your family. The big thing, and even then, we don't want to see you did 25 clubs, right? That's great and all. I just wonder how you manage your time. That sounds terrifying. Maybe instead what we want to see is that you're part of 2 clubs and you hold a position of leadership in both. And that will really help you a lot, especially with those honors college consideration and with the merit-based scholarships and the full ride opportunities at Georgia State. But that's in terms of the admissions process itself and to specific majors during your freshman year, we won't necessarily be looking into those clubs that much in detail. It'll be primarily for honors college and everything else.
So the next question goes to the idea that, there's been a lot of discussion about passion projects. And I put that in quotations because I know that, this is something that students are really like worried about, parents are really worried about trying to get their kids to do something along those lines. And obviously there's a little bit of an industry that's sort of grown around the idea of doing passion projects where students are able to pay substantial fees to be able to get graduate student mentors. What is your take on the idea of students doing like passion projects, if it's pay to play versus things that they've gone on to find on their own by contacting professors and such?
For us, we get a lot of that. So I think I can give you a pretty extensive answer, actually. Kind of tying into your previous question as well. We have the misconception with our applicants that you have to have research in order to get into CalTech, when 70% of our admitted class usually does not have any research experience at all. So a lot of our students are coming into CalTech with a lot of passion projects that they have done on their own. So it's not necessarily just pay to play. There are some students who are living in rural Georgia who are creating robots in their backyard out of recycled material that their mom has left over from cooking. Like, it's a lot of different things for you to showcase your STEM passion. So even though we do have a holistic approach to our application, the number one thing that we're always looking for is STEM passion. So like my colleagues previously said, it's not necessarily that you need to be in 25 chemistry clubs, but it's about which clubs were you actively involved in that have really shaped your STEM experience. You know, which one have you dedicated the time to really hone on to say, you know, me being a part of this club is why I want to study chemistry. I really have found success and I've really made connections. And, you know, I've done some things here that I never thought I could do. It's piqued my interest to explore a little bit more. So it's more so just about the intentionality behind what you're doing and not necessarily just doing things. A lot of times we also do get the misconception of who you're connected to, or, you know, your parents may be alum. We're not a alum-based school where your parents went here, which means you're automatically in. We're not one of those schools. We're also not a pay-to-play school either. So you truly do have to showcase a lot of your STEM passion in your application. One of my favorite students to talk about is one I just recently admitted. He's joining us this fall. He's located in Warner Robins, Georgia. His name is Randolph. And if you know Warner Robins, you know nothing's there except the Air Force Base. So he doesn't really have much opportunity to do anything, but he's also a boxer. So he talked about in his application about how he wants to go into prosthetics because of being able to see the veterans around him who didn't have access to those things to make them feel normal again. And using the mechanics of learning his body through boxing is helping him understand the intricacies of the human body, so that when he is making those things, he understands how things work and what they should feel like. Things like that showcase us his STEM passion. So granted, he hasn't been able to build these things on his own just yet. He's taken the necessary steps to say, hey, I don't have access to labs. I don't have access to mentors, but I do have access to this boxing league that really fuels my passion for creating these prosthetics for these veterans. So it's different ways for you to showcase how you're passionate about specific things without necessarily having 6 research papers and you've went to every single coding camp and your mom works at Google and your dad works at Microsoft. Those things are not necessarily the most important, because at the end of the day, it's up to you. Your parents could be great people, but your parents are not the ones submitting the application or coming to the institution. So if we can't get that story from you, that does not help your case. So when you are choosing things to immerse yourself into, you have to choose things that make sense for your future. If all you have access to is your high school chemistry club, you should be the absolute best member on that team. You should be able to come back and tell us, hey, we've done this set of experiments, and hey, my teacher they only have a master's degree and they've mentored me through these specific things, but I've learned these things which has pushed me to want to come to CalTech, go to Georgia Tech, go to Georgia State. It's ultimately up to you to understand somewhat. It's not 100% always, but you have to understand how you want to move forward and what specifically you're looking to do, so that when you are choosing these things, you're not just throwing things at the wall. You're intentionally doing these things. So when you're crafting your application, the person reading it and the committee that's making that decision can understand you well enough to say, this is a student who just needs a chance. They're not in an environment where they can do these things. They need to be in an environment where they can be cultivated. They're in an urban neighborhood. They're in a rural America. They don't have access to these labs and these mentors and these research opportunities. But if we bring them here, based on the way that they're talking, based on the experiments they've done in their living room, they're tearing apart their TVs, they've gotten grounded for breaking down computers. These are the type of things, because it's not always about just the access to opportunity, but it's always about finding a way or making one.
McKayla. Thank you, Jared. McKayla, do you want to?
Yeah, I don't feel like I need to add much more. That was better than I could have ever said. So thank you so much, Jared. But yeah, just to echo, it's really all about like being intentional about the activities you're choosing to get involved in. We don't, going back to Georgia Tech, we don't look for all of those involvement in clubs. It's being, do you have leadership in those clubs? Going back to our motto of progress and service, that's where we sort of look for students who embody our motto. So how are you serving other people? How are you involved? How are you intentional with your involvement? So yeah, echo everything Jared said.
Kenzo.
I mean, same. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, it's literally the exact same. I mean, very similarly, it's not something that we're going to be really looking into, especially for honors college and scholarship consideration. I think one of the big things, and I'm really glad you brought up this question because it does bring up a really great point about access to these opportunities, right? And I like that you use the pay to play, right, sort of verbiage, because that's one thing that I know that many of us here really stand against, right? Education is not meant to be something that is barred from people. It's not meant to be, you know, oh, you need to have all these things that only money can get you before you can come into the school, right? Similarly, again, we want to see what you can do with the resources you have. If that means like Jared was saying, and it was love the example of, you know, tearing apart your computer, mom, dad on the phone. I'm so sorry that I'm putting this on their minds, but you know, tearing things down to build them back up and see how they work. That is much more exciting than seeing that you paid $1,500 to a graduate assistant to do research, right? That's not really speaking to your interest. I mean, for all we know, that could have been your high school guidance counselor that told you to do that. That could have been mom and dad. That could have been auntie, uncle, whoever it could have been. But seeing that, like, yeah, I got grounded like for 6 months because I broke our, you know, 60-inch plasma TV or whatever. That's a much more exciting story to hear about your passions and interests when it comes to those STEM fields.
It's sort of like a follow-up, and I think you may have already all of you answered this, but is it important that students get published? Because again, that's another thing that like kids who are doing research, want to get published. How important is it? Do you review research papers as part of the application process? We can start in reverse. So Kenzo, and then we can move.
Sure. So I mean, kind of echoing what what I was saying about the like the pay to play, the passion projects. Very similarly, it's not something that we're going to take heavily into consideration, maybe for scholarship or honors college consideration. But you know, the way that I kind of want you to think about it is also this way, right? We are reviewing this year. We had 35,000 students to apply for first year as a first year for fall. As much as I would love to sit down and read all of your research papers, I don't think I have enough time in a day to read a 10, 15, 20-page research paper and evaluate applications at the same time. So unfortunately, you know, I love the passion. I love that you're getting involved. I love that you're starting early. That's incredible. But in terms of our admissions process, it won't necessarily play a significant factor in, you know, whether or not we're going to extend that offer of admissions.
Same. A lot of students, especially like students whose parents are affiliated with any of the Atlanta like colleges, a lot of students will have research experience, but that does not mean you're automatically admitted to Georgia Tech. If you have the opportunity, that is great. But again, going back to being intentional about those opportunities. So how are you being intentional about that time? But that is not something that you have to be admitted to Georgia Tech. In terms of research papers, we do not read them. I think 60 applications is enough to read, along with allowing up to 4 letters of recommendation. That's plenty of enough to read for us. But that's great that you're writing research papers, but we won't read them.
Funny thing is, our faculty does read your research papers. Now, again, it's not required for you to have research to get into CalTech. Now, is it competitive? Absolutely. I won't pretend and say that it's not competitive. If you have that opportunity, absolutely take it. Some, like I said, some students' parents work in these amazing places. So if, you know, if you happen to have the opportunity to do those things, absolutely. I would never tell you not to take advantage of those things. But they are not required. However, if you are into these spaces, I will say honestly, from my viewpoint, when I review applications, a lot of students will miss the mark because they'll go do these research projects, not realizing they have to get recommendations from these people that they're researching under. And if your researcher is just basically saying, great kid came and did work, that's letting us know that you weren't putting forth your best effort, because there's a difference in the recommendations when a professor is ranting and raving about never having a high school student in their lab before and you keeping up with graduate students. It's different when those professors are talking about how they wanted to publish your research because this is the most blown away they've been in their 22-year career in the labs. So when you are taking these opportunities, it's not just about having the opportunity, it's about taking advantage of the opportunity, because when you are submitting these research papers, granted, I know nothing about what you're submitting, but because we have faculty who also review your applications, they are very well versed into what you're writing. So they know what fluff research is. They know what they can tell if you were just holding people's hands and throwing your name on the paper. They can see all those things because, again, we're one of the greatest research institutions in the world. So your applications are being reviewed by Nobel laureates. They absolutely know, no matter what your subject is, they know what you're researching. So if you are doing those things, it's important that you are putting your best foot forward in those. It's not just enough to be published. It's not just enough to say you did it. It's about the impact of your work at the end of the day. So don't feel like you have to do these things because they're required, but if you are doing them, you absolutely need to be putting your best foot forward in them, because if you're not, then there's no purpose of you submitting it, because again, here at CalTech specifically, just because the admissions officers may not have a background in STEM, again, our faculty are reviewing these applications as well. So should your application make it to faculty, they're absolutely reading your research. And then they're also researching who you did that research under to see their credibility. So I would say be wise with what you're choosing, but then also just put your best foot forward at all times.
We're almost like close to a time, but I wanted to ask, one of the things that the UC system is studying is the impact of early selection of students into STEM pathways. One of the things that the UC system was very worried about is the idea that as early as 7th, 8th grade in most schools in America, the pathway to whether or not you get to calculus, A, B, B, C is determined that early. What do we do when students are sort of placed in tracks that don't allow them to take AP classes or don't allow them to get to that highest level? How do you evaluate these students in those contexts then?
I think for us, again, this comes to storytelling in your application. Some students are sometimes afraid to speak up for themselves in their applications because they feel like it may come off a little distasteful in the eyes of the admissions officer, but it actually worked in your favor. If you know for sure that you wanted specific opportunities that you were banned from doing so, or your counselor wasn't supportive of, those are the times where you let us know, hey, I had interest in doing those things, but because of the way my school is set up, I wasn't allowed to do them. So maybe I did these things on my own, or I self-study. We get a lot of students who self-study and take AP exams just for the fun of it. We don't require AP exams, but they will self-study because they just wanted to do those things, or their school didn't offer a specific course, that they didn't have the opportunity to take them. So we are fully aware that those things are happening, and our director of admissions is actively in the fight to kind of dispel how those things are going. But absolutely, if you are in those environments, let us know. In your application, when you have those personal statements, or when you talk about academic barriers, we do have opportunities for you to talk about that. That is where you go in and say, I feel like I could have done more if I was given the opportunity, but based on my surroundings, I was not allowed to do so. So in hindsight, I chose to make experiments on my own. In hindsight, I'm often on Schoolhouse. I'm watching YouTube videos. I'm glued to these science fairs. I'm attending these competitions. My school isn't supportive of it, but these are the avenues that I've had to take on my own to ensure I got the results that I needed. So please talk about them.
McKayla, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I was just going to echo the same thing. Definitely talking about that in your application. So once we review application, we want to make sure there's any questions that we have. Like if we have a question, then we feel like there's something missing. And so definitely always encourage students to utilize in the Common App, the additional information section, to tell us anything that we might not know otherwise by looking at your application. And so that's a great opportunity to sort of explain those different nuances that we wouldn't know unless you told us. So definitely be intentional about using every single space in your application as much as possible.
Kenzo?
I mean, I think they both covered it extremely well. So very similarly, I mean, we're, again, looking at it in the context of the school, we're looking at what you have available to you and what opportunities are present to you. So, I mean, if you don't have that opportunity to take, let's say AP Calc, what did you do instead? right? Talk about that, like McKayla was saying, give us some more information, really paint that full picture for us. So that way, and this is one thing that I kind of point out that I have to do every once in a while is I don't want to have to call a high school counselor and say, hey, I'm reviewing such and such student here at Georgia State. Can you just give me some more information about XYZ, right? We want to be able to read it, look at it, and get an idea of who you are beyond what's just on paper. So definitely be mindful of that, especially with our honors college consideration. It's, again, very competitive process. So we want to be able to make sure that we get that full picture of who you are, what your passions and interests are, so we can make an informed decision as well when we review those applications.
And then I guess to sort of close this out, any like words of advice for future applicants, prospective applicants to all of your schools?
So I guess I'll start off just my big thing here, and this is coming from someone I was a first generation college student in the United States, so I figured out a lot of things on my own. Like to give you an idea, I applied to 23 colleges nationwide. Don't do that. Absolutely not. That was a mistake. But what I would definitely suggest is if you are really interested in a specific STEM field, major, or program, do your research, and not just the research for that specific institution, but go beyond, right? Like, what does it mean to be a mechanical engineer? What does it mean to be a computer scientist or a computer engineer? Just because I think sometimes we end up having these preconceptions of what we think these majors are, these programs are, based on what we see, on TV, on movies, on radio shows, on music, whatever the case might be. So, do your research, really look into it, see if it's a good fit for you and you are a good fit for that program. Because I promise you, if you pursue something that turns out to be nothing of what you thought it was and you don't like it, but you don't want to change your major, you want to power through, college will not be a fun experience. So make sure that you're doing that research, make sure you're looking into it, that way you're fully informed when you start doing those college application processes, when you start looking into those majors. And I guess I'll popcorn to Jared. Surprise.
Surprise. I honestly will say intentional is the best way to go. The more we know, the more we understand. If it's important to you, it's important to us. If we don't know, we do not know, we cannot assume, because that is against all of our admissions practices. So when you are choosing these schools, make sure you're choosing schools that align with what your future is. Honestly speaking, we've gotten a lot of applications where they will literally write in the essay portion, please don't read my application, I'm only applying because my parents are making me. You have to have those conversations with your parents beforehand. Make sure that you are applying to school so that you're the one that's going. At the end of the day, your parents may be upset about something, but at the end of the day, you're going to the school. You're the one who has to take the classes. So make sure you're doing your research. The best schools for your majors, do they have a student life that you want to be a part of? Are they what's their alumni success like? Do they have opportunities for you to really grow in that major? What are their professors doing? Be very intentional about the schools that you're choosing, because education is getting a little sticky via the government. So you want to make sure that you can get the best education that you possibly can.
And just to add to that, I would say take your time. Like when you're applying to all of our institutions, definitely take your time in the application, because I feel like we've been reading for a while. We can tell when an application's rushed. So definitely take your time in filling out everything. I was a first generation college student and my mom never went to college, but she read my essay for punctuation. So just having multiple eyes on your application, making sure there's nothing missed, nothing left unsaid, because this is how we get to know you, is through your application. So the more you tell us, the more we know about you, and the better we can make an informed decision of admission. So definitely take your time.
Thank you, everyone, for a wonderful session. This was really informative. And so I really appreciate all of the advice that you've given, all of your shared knowledge. For students who need help with filling out the college application, you can look up the Access Companion. And so that's hosted on Oregon State University's website. So you've got the ability to go in and get questions answered about each component of the application itself. But I'd like to thank Kenzo, McKayla, and Jared for joining us today and sharing all of your wonderful tips and advice. Thank you very much.
No problem. Last thing before I go, I'll be in Georgia for 2 weeks in September. All of the fairs, the Savannah, the private school fair, I will be at all of them. So even if you can't find me, or if you want to wait to not send me a 6-page email, just come see me at any of the fairs. I'll be at a fair every single day. I kid you not. So be on the lookout. If you're on the CalTech mailing list, they will also be harassing you to let you know that I will be there. So I look forward to meeting all of you.
This webinar is recorded and it will be available on SACAC's website in the next few days. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. Take care. Have a wonderful evening.